I'm not sure that what I'm going to say is entirely in tune with the theme of your meeting, but I hope you'll get something out of it anyway. So this is the universe, and in the universe, water is not a very common commodity, although people are now starting to find more traces of water in different parts of the universe. And this is a galaxy, and this is our Earth, is planet Earth. And if we were to try and describe what an environment is, there are many, many definitions that have been put up around the place over many years. But I like the one most by Albert Einstein, who said the environment is everything that isn't me. But actually the environment might be him as well, because I think it's very important that human beings don't disconnect themselves from the Earth's ecosystems. We are not that special compared with all the other organisms that are alive. We interact in ways that are often predictable in terms of animal behavior and so on. Now, that's how much water there is on Earth, and I'm not quite sure how to say it, but it's quite a lot of water. And not very much of it is fresh water. Only about 2.5% of the water on the planet is fresh water. So that's giving you a little bit of an introduction to our environment and the fact that it's got vast amounts of water on it, but very little of it is fresh water. What about us? Well, 57% of you and I, more or less, is water. And that was really where I thought that it would be interesting to talk about, or what I thought would be interesting to talk about in the context of this meeting, because the pharmaceuticals and the foods that you've been talking about all end up in water. And water is key in terms of distributing these nutritional resources and pharmaceutical resources around your body. They're key to the action of these substances. And so that's where I'm trying to bring water into things. Now, if we try to think about the history of the world, this is just a brief summary of human history. One of the key things is that we started off with a very low population, and that low population was maintained in our environment, the planet of the Earth, for many, many years. And it's only really been in the last 1,000 years that the population started to rise, and really very recently that the population has increased dramatically. And I want to say a little bit more about that at the moment. If you think about this point back here, in terms of what was going on the Earth and the environment that we live in, there were lots of natural forces that impacted on the quality of our ecosystems, the climatic forces, the wind, the waves, the other organisms on the planet, all interacting for these ecosystems. And the quality of human life was very much determined by the state of these ecosystems. And from the ecosystems we've derived a variety of so-called ecosystem services. We're lucky that the rains come down and percolate through the soil and stimulate the growth of plants and so on, and we can use those kind of services. There's the other organisms on the planet that we use as resources, and of course the quality of the ecosystem has a huge impact on our health and well-being. We need access to water, but it needs to be clean water. We need access to food. We need to often wash that food and so on. So that's how it was at the beginning. But as we've moved along to this end of the curve, we've now introduced a new factor, anthropogenic factors, human-generated factors that impact the ecosystems in tremendously important ways. And you all know what those ways are, things like greenhouse gas emissions causing climate change, environmental pollutants, the destruction of biodiversity, the destruction of habitats, the destruction of the ability of us to produce food in some areas of the world with desertification. So these two things are now interacting together. And this is relatively recent in the history of the world. And we are not entirely sure where it's all leading to. And I'll come back to that in a moment. So I'd like to put to you the notion then that in terms of living organisms, this looking at nutrition, physiology, how physiology works, the pharmacology of drugs, the toxicology of different poisons that get into our body, all of which is the study of substances in water. If we did not have this water in our bodies, then this whole scenario would be very different. Think of it in terms of a cell, which is about 85% water actually. Diffusion and solubility of toxins, foods, pharmaceuticals, really important. The bioavailability, that is the availability of nutrients to be taken up into cells, is very much determined by the characteristics, the ionic concentrations of different substances in the water, the pH of body water, the acidity of body water, and so on. Pollutants, it's the same. Water is a very important living environment, an environment in which we can live, and in fact the vast majority of organisms on the planet have evolved from organisms that have lived in water, which might explain, or at least be as consistent with, the chemical composition of our body fluids is very similar to that of seawater, and that's true for nearly all organisms. Ventilation and respiration, breathing of gases in and out of your body, getting gases in and out of your body for respiration. Interestingly, in marine organisms or aquatic organisms, you have to ventilate about 20 times as much water over your gills as you would have to air over your lungs, simply because a litre of water contains less oxygen than a litre of air. Water is very important in temperature regulation in our bodies, and temperature regulation is key to affecting rates of diffusion, bioavailability, chemical transformations of pharmaceuticals, of nutrients, and so on. And food uptake is influenced by water in many cases. Some cells have a process of pinocytosis where they spring off little vesicles and suck things in. So water is pretty important and is at the core of all of these issues. But I want to kind of move off from that general introduction to say a few more things about the relationship between human beings and their environment, and just mention to you this concept of biophilia. Now, has everybody heard of biophilia? Oh, good. So biophilia was an idea that was put forward by E.O. Wilson of Harvard University. Ed Wilson's one of the pioneers in raising the issues about biodiversity loss and those kind of things. And he's tried to make the case, put forward a hypothesis that human beings do not flourish if you remove them from nature. And why would that be? Well, the tens of millions of years of evolution of human beings and their ancestors has taken place in intimate contact with nature. And it's only been in the last 150 years, really, that we've started to live more and more in cities, starting to be more and more cut off from nature. And if you look at the UK today, 85% of the UK population live in an urban environment. And it may come up again later, but just to say that children now spend only 9% of their time outdoors on average. Adults, it's 21%. Horrendous, absolutely horrendous.